Hi, hi, hi. We're back again with another movie or show or something. Look, guys, we've had a very, very rough week. We've had a lot of different things coming at us with regards to the channel, with regards to life in general. And we just want to thank the 500 subscribers, the 508 subscribers we've gathered
Woo!
in the past. Um, in the past, I think 3 months or so, it has been like overwhelming support from you guys. And we just really adore anyone who's listening, anyone who is showing us so much love. And we're extremely proud of how far this little channel has come in this amount of time. Obviously, 500 subscribers is well, I guess it's not a redeemable milestone, but uh, this is this is Sank and Suri's childhood dream. We've uh, we've kind of become friends um, through movies and through shows, and I'm just thinking about the first time we were in a classroom and we were playing this silly Hollywood Bollywood game where it's kind of like Hangman, but for guessing movie and movie titles, and you write out Hollywood and you strike off every letter when someone gets a letter wrong for a movie, and um, that's how Sank and I became friends. And at that point of time, nobody thought about launching a channel or doing a podcast or giving movie recommendations, and um, it was just the two of us, in exchanging movie recommendations, freaking out about Dexter because that back then, Dexter had just hit the waves and was very important to anyone who had not seen that kind of storytelling. But we never thought, that it would become so important in our lives where we would want to, dedicate a part of our life to movies and shows in such a way. And it's unfathomable and it's beautiful. And we are so, so, so happy that you're here with us because it's just been Sank and Suri for a long time. And now to have 508 of you with us, it's like our little, friend group has kind of expanded quite suddenly. And it's awesome. And we love you. And we hope that you will stick around as we launch into the next couple of next phase 2023. We have a lot of exciting plans. We want to explore them and experiment with them, um, and hopefully you'll be contributing to that process as well, because we are watching you guys subscribe and like, and we would really appreciate it if you started giving us comments and feedback. And today's um, discussion is about this really beautiful format of storytelling. And yes, we would appreciate your feedback in terms of what you want us to review, but we would also want to know about what you guys expect us to talk about, because today we are trying um, to do something about a very new movie that got released on Netflix a couple of days ago, and also kind of go into the details of the making of it. And this movie is wholesome, it's sweet, it's definitely part of a lot of people's childhood memories. It's a retelling by Guillermo del Toro, and he has done what I believe is the most fantastic treatment of a very, what people would consider a very childish tale, but to present it in a way that would make sense to adults is fascinating. And I think this is the best movie that Sank and I could have done, considering that it is about growing up. And Sank and I grew up together, kind of, teen years through adult years. And this movie is a big representation of that, because you've probably seen its Disney iteration, Pinocchio. And it's about, it's coming of age. It's about understanding the world while you're still, not quite grown up, but you have to become an adult one way or the other. And this movie kind of represents that. And that's Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which is released on Netflix. And there is so much semantics to why this movie is important, not just in terms of animation, but in terms of storytelling itself. We are officially entering the era of how stories are now being stirred not by protagonists but by the characters that are kind of supporting, I guess, the hero of the story or the journey of the hero, not necessarily as their sidekicks, but more as their mentors, as their guides, as their spiritual advisors, as people who are influencing the hero to do the right or the wrong thing. And I think this movie wraps that up so beautifully. And it's come just in time for Christmas. It's come just in time for end of the year. It's very self-reflective. And when I think Sank watched it maybe 2 days or 3 days before I did, uh, what were your initial thoughts when you got to it?
So I knew Pinocchio, like obviously it was not a massive part of our childhood, but it was around, right? And I have a thing about remakes. Like I don't like it if it's just if it's done just for the sake of it. So you can either make a remake to tell you can make a remake and change something about it. You can make a remake if you think that the original is not up to the mark.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also make remakes and you can give your own twist to it. And I think Guillermo del Toro did that. He
Mm-hmm.
took the Disney version and he made that his own. There are so many things that he wanted to tell through Pinocchio, and that's what I loved about it. It starts off as something which we haven't seen in a Pinocchio tale, right? We have seen so many reincarnations of Pinocchio. We've seen so many adaptations of it. There have been actual Italian remakes of Pinocchio, but it has never been done like this. Guillermo del Toro, I think he just took the story and he took the story because he wanted to tell a story of his own. And Pinocchio felt like the story of Pinocchio just felt like a medium of him doing that. So the way it starts off with uh can we spoil? Yes, we can spoil, right? Because it happens literally in the first 10
We
minutes of the
have
movie.
to. There's some things that are going to be obvious spoilers, guys. But we won't spoil the ending for you. Do
No,
keep in
obviously.
mind that we will not spoil the ending for you. So stick around. This is not going to ruin the movie experience for you in any way.
No, no. So in the first few minutes, if you know Pinocchio, you know that Geppetto's son dies, and we've never seen his son before in any of the adaptations, right? We've only
Yep.
seen Geppetto talk about his son.
Yes.
So the fact that he dedicated 15-20 minutes of it just and not even introducing the titular character in the first 20 minutes of it, that was a bold move.
Yeah.
And you immediately know that this is not the Pinocchio tale that you're used to.
Mhm.
This is telling a tale which hasn't been told before, which is something he's giving us a bigger picture. And what this Pinocchio was for me was that it was talking about death in a very interesting way,
Yes.
right? So the fact that Pinocchio himself is a wooden boy, he doesn't have any life in him,
Mhm.
and the fact that he cannot die, basically, and then to have him embody and to have Geppetto imagine him as his real boy who has actually died, that was for me a very interesting take.
I think there's something to be said about parenting in general. In the first 20 minutes, you see Geppetto to be very caring, very patient, listening to Carlo, who's his son. And Carlo's character is adorable. He's so lovable. The first 5 minutes of how he is and how he's around his father, and he's imitating his father like kids do. And he's very sweet, very kind, very like a non-problematic child. Like there is nothing that Geppetto ever has to probably worry about Carlo because Carlo's perfect. And that's the point, right? Like when you create something so perfect and then it's also your child, right? And you spend your days and you build your memories around this thing that you've brought into the world. It's fascinating how they have wrapped every detail in that. So they show him following, Geppetto's instructions very obediently. They show him to be extremely good, with like being a child and being responsible at the same time. He would follow his father around, trying to figure out how he works, and Carlo would immediately say, "Oh, I'm going to do all this, this carpentry and this woodwork and everything that I'm going to do it just like you." And I think that's a very fascinating aspect of the storytelling, where there is a point, like I think there are two phases of every childhood: one where you want to be exactly like your parents, and one where you want to be nothing like your parents. And I think Carlo represents the first half. So in many ways, you'll realize that both Pinocchio and Carlo are actually the same person, but they're representing two different parts of someone's childhood. Carlo is younger, or is shown as younger, and his father's his hero. His father is like perfect. He could do no wrong in his eyes. And like there's a small scene where he picks a pine cone, which is very elemental to the story. He picks a pine cone and says, "What about this pine cone?" And the father's like, "No, this pine cone won't do, because it's chipped, so it won't spring into the right tree or whatever." And he dedicates a portion of his life into finding the perfect pine cone. And that leads to a very big tragedy, that when he finally finds it and he impresses his father, he accidentally leaves it behind at the work site in the church, where his father is, I think, carving out, was it Jesus's statue out of wood,
Yeah.
on a cross. And he goes back in to get the pine cone he left behind. And I think that's where the bombing happens, and he Carlo does not survive that attack. And but the dedication, right? Like how much you want to be like your father, and how much that validation is important, that he, in spite of his father saying we need to leave now, he still goes back for that pine cone, because it's that important to him. And I think even as adults, the phase comes and goes, but you always are looking for that validation, that sense of approval from your parents. And that's kind of where the story starts, where you see Geppetto spiraling, completely spiraling, like the devastation of that event. It breaks him. And the thing is, it's not even a war attack. They are emptying a they're like emptying weapons off of their aircrafts because it got too heavy, and it just happened to be Carlos and Geppetto's little town. So it's not
Mm.
even a war thing at that point of time. It's just complete human indecency that happens for 5 seconds, and Geppetto loses the love of his life, his child. And this is the first part of the story. And they are, of course, distracting you with what I think is some of the most beautiful animation, the colors and the movement of the characters. And this is stop animation, right? Like they
Stop
have
motion animation.
stop motion animation, and they have gone really, really deep into how these characters are going to emote. So they've shown that in the making, which is also on Netflix, that all the characters except for Pinocchio, their faces were like, part of like a mechanical clockwork kind of a thing, where they were literally moving their faces like human beings, whereas Pinocchio had a mask that would change so he would look more puppet like. And they have gone into deep painstaking details to make that happen. So if you go into this movie expecting like regular stop motion, it's not going to happen. They have gone into making sure that stop motion gets the best result in this. So it's not just a gimmick, it is actually necessary, because they're trying to explain very adult, very dark themes through a child story. And they have done, I think it is the best animation I have seen in a very long time. And it is with Mr. Guillermo's classical use of like earth hues, and every once in a while a fantastical or a mythical character comes in that has nothing to do with the color palette that he's chosen. And they have gone so beautifully into that. Like it almost distracts you from the story. Like it's so beautiful. But yeah, I think the adaptation, like Sang said, it's not just a cultural adaptation, or I want to make a remake because I can do it better, or I can do it different. It's not even about that. Said I want to make a remake because Geppetto's story as a father needs to be highlighted. Pinocchio is the protagonist, but Geppetto is the creator of this protagonist, quite literally. And I think that is the most beautiful ascension of events I have seen happen in a very long time. And it's just, I'm I have always loved everything Guillermo del Toro has made or created or directed. There has been no flaws as I have seen. But my God, to go into such deep, immaculate detail without taking away from the story, because that does happen where the animation becomes so important, becomes bigger than the story, bigger than the characters, and without doing that, they have kept such a fine balance. It's amazing. I'm so thrilled that we are in a generation that gets to watch this immediately. It gets released and we're on Netflix and you watched it and it's awesome. But yeah, I think there's something to be said about Geppetto spiraling. And what did you think about that song? How did you see that that transformation?
The spiraling, as in like the thing that leads to Pinocchio
Stallo's
being,
there.
no, the thing that leads to him making Pinocchio.
Yeah.
Oh, that again, that's something that we haven't seen. Like, I think all of Pinocchio starts from that thing
Mhm.
where Geppetto is sad. We can see that he's mourning the loss of his son. And but we immediately go on to the Pinocchio part, the part where he's actually carving Pinocchio. So sure, I think it was very important for us to see the opening as to what has happened that has made him uh spiral this much, right? Uh he knows that his son has died because of collateral damage, basically. And not that it like hurts more or less, but he is annoyed about something. He is mad about something which is as trivial as can we say war?
he's he is annoyed at, well, of course everyone is annoyed at war, but also annoyed at a split second decision which changes his life forever. A
Yeah.
pine.
He might also he might also be blaming himself for
Yes.
doing that, right?
Which is pretty much, yeah, that's pretty much what he does, right? He does blame himself. Does he blame the war? Absolutely. Does he blame the stupidity of going back for a pine cone? Absolutely. uh but for the most part, you're right, he does blame himself, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. I think this movie is dealing with that, and Guillermo del Toro has said that this is the third movie of his death trilogy, which is told through children. The first being Devil's Backbone, and the second was Pan's Labyrinth, and this was the third. And it's very uh, surprising to know that this is actually Guillermo del Toro's first animation movie. So in a way, he's saying that, yeah, and Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth was not made for kids. It had a lot of heavy themes, but I think he made sure this time with everything that kids should watch it. There might be themes that they might not understand,
Yes.
but this it's like him introducing kids to the concept of death, to the concept of loss, and how one should actually deal with it.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, that's the great way to, like, the way he showed the spiraling and
Mm.
the thing that leads to him carving Pinocchio. I think that was a great way of teaching kids and even humans. Obviously, I
Yeah,
I I
adults.
obviously learned a lot of things from this movie.
Absolutely. I mean the the one other time I have seen this happen in an animation movie, like of course the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man does, touch themes of death and loss and grief and stuff like that. But to do it in an animation film which is meant for kids, that is a very
Yeah.
different challenge altogether. The
Oh,
one other time I've, oh yeah,
Disney does that too,
yeah,
but they immediately go on to the happy part.
yeah. There's
Like the
immediately a
parents get
musical.
killed, and the next scene is, "Can do you want to build a
No
snowman?"
man. Yeah. And that's fine for
Yeah,
the most part. But what happens is there is now a generation of people who like us, who grew up watching, Disney and adored Disney, and who grew up watching Pixar and adored Pixar. And for me, I think the other time I've seen death or the element of death handled very skillfully was in The Incredibles. where Elastigirl is talking to her kids, and she says, "You remember, when you watch those Saturday cartoons, and there's this villain that is only after the hero, but won't do anything to kids. They won't harm kids." But and they're like, "Yeah, yeah, I know, that's it. These people are not that way. They don't care if you're children." And that is to that happened once in Incredibles, and that is a very dark thing to tell kids, that even a child will not be spared in the name of collateral damage, in the name of war, in the name of rivalry, animosity. Even a child will not be spared. And I think the second time I saw that happen was in Pinocchio, and I had to wait a long bloody time for for something so dark to be presented very, not casually per se, but very straightforwardly with a story. That there is a world where Geppetto survives the death of his child, and he creates Pinocchio, not necessarily to replace his son, but more because he's mad that the pine cone that grows into a tree near the gravestone of Carlo is chopped down to create Pinocchio. It's like, oh, you took away my son, said I'm going to make a son out of you. And that is the next part of the movie, where Pinocchio comes to life, and Pinocchio is brought to life by a wood spirit, and she is stunning. I have not seen such a beautifully made mythical creature. And she has no expressions, but she's very calming to talk to. Her face doesn't move. I think her and her sister Death, they're the only two characters whose face doesn't move. They have one mask, and they have a human-esque mask, but their body is different. It has feathers and a tail, and they are they're blue, but not like like a sky blue or something, like a Prussian blue, like a cerulean blue, something that you won't see naturally occurring somewhere, but it does exist in this universe. And I think the conversations that she has with the cricket, my favorite character in the movie, Sebastian. It's so adorable. It's like, what about my house? And because there's a cricket that has inhabited the tree. And I love that they pushed that detail in there, that, when you cut down a tree, you're basically taking someone's home away without their permission. And that's where we meet Sebastian. And this very sophisticated, very suave, very worldly cricket, who has read a lot and writes a lot and wants to publish his book. And I think that's the deal that the Woodspread and him have. Like, I have seen the in Disney Pinocchio, where there is a cricket and he plays as the conscience of Pinocchio, but I've never quite understood why a cricket was chosen. And to give that explanation, that the cricket resided in the tree that Pinocchio was made out of, which is why the cricket is now in the heart of Pinocchio. I It's so much poetry all wrapped together in one little scene so quickly. It's
Is that part of the original story? I don't know.
no,
No, right? Like,
it's
I
not.
think it's Jiminy Cricket in other
Mhm.
stories are like he's there just to tell the story. Obviously, he's telling the story here as well, but
Yes.
uh, we've not seen this part of him where he's also integral to the story and not just a side.
He's
Just
not just a sidekick.
Yeah.
Hmm. And he's also narrating the story, what seems like to us. And then they reveal very beautifully towards the end that it's not just us, that the story is we are witnesses to a witness, which is like amazing. And he his existence in the whole story is not necessarily about being Pinocchio's conscience, but kind of protecting him, because, and with a vested interest, because he is promised by the spirit, by this mythical creature of the forest, that if he keeps Pinocchio safe, she will grant him a wish. And that wish is he can publish his own book. And if anybody like grew up reading Roald Dahl and read like Big Friendly Giant or something like that, like why that is important, where one of the characters that are pivotal to the story starts narrating. And I did not know about that till big friendly giant. And then to see that happen again with the characters who's not the central character, not the antagonist, not anything. If they are narrating the story, why are they narrating the story? They're like, oh, the story is interesting to me. No, 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 no. I got a deal out of this. I'm going to get myself published. I'm going to be a published author at the end of this. So there's a vested interest. And you see the transformation of not just Pinocchio, but of Sebastian, of Geppetto, of Pinocchio, because the whole setup is like, oh, this is about Pinocchio becoming a real boy and blah blah blah. It's not about Pinocchio becoming a real boy. It's about the realization of events that human beings can forever evolve. You could be a fully grown adult and still change. You could be a cricket and still change. You could be something that a spirit brought you to life. And yes, sure, that is the premise that he has to become a real boy. But what does the words real boy actually mean? It means to be more than what your intended purpose was. Your intended purpose was to keep your father company, but to transform the purpose that you were born with into something else. That's the story. That even your purpose is not definite. And so much of, I've seen like a lot of Western storytelling about the chosen one and oh, this person was selected, this person was born to do whatever, whatever. That's not the kind of storytelling that you'll see, like especially in anime and Asian storytelling. It's about working on yourself and putting effort in yourself and then becoming something great. You're not the chosen one. No one has bestowed this on you, right? This is not some regal heavenly right that you have or something of that nature. And to show that in this story with that cultural context, that yeah, you are, and you're different, you are not a human being, but does that in many ways make you more susceptible to transformation? Because you are capable of being whatever you want. You were born as a puppet and you become something else. And that is just amazing to me. And now that I think of it, the metaphor that all parents kind of want their kids to be like them or be the best version of themselves gets pushed through in that constantly, right? Where Geppetto and Pinocchio are not seeing eye to eye about his existence, and Pinocchio does whatever he likes and does not agree with Geppetto. And Geppetto's like, "Why can't you be more like Carlo?" Which is, oh my God, that must be a thing that a lot of younger siblings probably go through, right? Like, look at your older brother, Indian Sharma ji ka beta. That's what, because there's a scene where it's like, why can't you be more like Carlo? And Geppetto's completely disappointed in Pinocchio. And I think that kind of devastation is when a child goes through that you're not enough, that you have to be a better version of yourself for the sake of keeping your father, your mom happy. They have put all of that. And I wish so much that this shows up in more storytelling.
I think like that shows very well in this Pinocchio's version of Pleasure Island, where
Yeah.
he's sent, he's obviously nabbed by what's the bad guy's name who kidnaps him?
I've forgotten, but the guy who runs the carnival, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So when he's attracting him, he's obviously telling him about so many things that he can do that he's not able to do now. Like, so obviously, when we are talking about Pinocchio not being a real boy, but we also see him not wanting to study like any normal boy would not want to at that point. He wants to have fun.
Yes.
He's exploring the world because he's just been born. So it is sort of like a fish out of the water scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So he wants to explore more of it, and not just through books, to actually he wants to experience all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the movie is trying to say that just because someone doesn't have a real life in them doesn't mean that they're not a real person.
Yeah.
They also have that the knack of learning new things and everything, and they also want to explore the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And to kind of extend on your point, everyone has their own timeline. Everyone has their
Mhm.
own timeline of doing what they want to do. When you're kids, there's one child that is a star example. All the children are expected to function as the star child, but maybe they are not, going to work on that expedited timeline or the slowdown, whatever it is that parents' expectations are. To reflect your expectations on your child sometimes puts them under unnecessary pressure. And when you read the fairy tale of Pinocchio is shown as a person who runs away because he's just crazy and bratty, and he was built to be silly. But when you see the context of it in this movie, he doesn't run away to do something fun. He runs away to prove to his father that he can be great, like Carlo, that he can be aligned with the expectations of his father's, like what was considered a perfect son. And I don't know if this was intentional, but you get to see how, like with adoption, especially, right? Like you don't know what you're getting. And Geppetto becomes an adoptive father, although he creates Carlo, but it's not his child. It's technically the wood spirit's child, if you think about it. And he is now adopting this new child that is nothing like his son and is still projecting his expectations on him, because it's easier to parent, a good child and a child that's, curious and goofy. um and you see them kind of meeting somewhere in the middle in the story, where Pinocchio realizes that his dad was not, you know didn't mean ill for him, and Geppetto realizes that he's just a child. What am I expecting? Because he might seem like he's like, tall and lanky, but he's technically, like you said, he's just born. He's like a baby. He seems like a teenager, but he is a baby because he doesn't know anything about the world. And I think that setup, especially the villain setup, right? Because he doesn't present as a villain. He presents as worldly and wise and suave and sophisticated. So uh, what would a child know? He wouldn't. He would think, oh, this is a perfectly okay kid, right? Like why Stranger Danger failed was because they said, oh, all bad people look bad and shady. And no, bad people actually know how to mask their evil. And Pinocchio, like all children, is unaware of that. And that makes me, it fills my heart with joy, because you see Geppetto fighting against Pinocchio going into the carnival, and then somebody finds out that he's immortal, so they want to enlist him for the war. And he's like, no, 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 he has to be a child, and he has to be my child. This is not the life I wanted for him. To see a parent fight for that right, at the same time kind of balancing his emotions for it, is beautiful. The story is not just about a puppet that comes to life. Like, you quickly forget that this is so bizarre. This is a puppet that came to life. Why aren't people like talking about that? Sure, they are, but it's also that this is someone's child, and this is someone's, thing that they have to protect, and is very dear to them. And that's most parents. They'll protect them to the point where it doesn't even make sense anymore. And I think that's what this story is mostly.
Also, did you notice, like other Guillermo del Toro movies, all the sort of gray characters, bad characters, they're all humans.
Yes.
Like the bad guy who kidnaps Pinocchio in other versions is a fox,
Yeah.
and here the Del Toro's made him a human.
Yeah.
It's like all the people who have done him wrong they are humans.
They're all human beings. The person pushing for Pinocchio to join the army is a human.
Hmm.
And he's terrible to his own son too. See, they're showing the toxic parenting patterns over and over again, right? Like, I'm a soldier of the war, so you have to be and that's a child. And Pinocchio and he don't start off on good terms, and they have this bonding moment where they are both products of fatherhood, where the fathers expect something of them and they cannot live up to it, and they're suffering. And so they're suffering together. And that scene is beautiful between him and that boy. Oh God, he's so scared. And he says, like, I'm scared. Like, I don't want to do this. And that vulnerability, like, I think it's a very important movie for like young boys everywhere, that you can have that vulnerability with the right person, with your friend, and just admit sometimes that you're not all manly and macho and bulletproof, because you're not. No one is. That's the point. It- oh God, I'm tearing up as I'm thinking about it. It's just eh, we are trying very hard to like sidestep the eventual spoilers, but we when we watch this movie, the thing is both of us are madly in love with Guillermo del Toro's style of narration. So there it does come from a point of comfort for us that if he's there, I'm sure the story will be great. And anyone who's not watched his previous creations may feel a bit uncomfortable as the story is progressing, but it is not to make you uncomfortable. It is actually a vehicle to kind of include yourself in a storyline that is familiar to you, yet is like larger than life. And that's where that discomfort comes from. Um, and he does that with every movie. Every movie of his has that element, and it's beautiful. What else did we definitely want to talk about? There's one element in it where Mussolini makes an appearance, and I very specifically remember thinking about Joey's grandmother from Friends, because she was the sixth person to spit on his hung body or something. And I'm like wondering if like Joey's grandmother is like there in the mix of people who were there. But they have given those storylines where Pinocchio is performing or supposed to perform for Mussolini, and he chooses not to protect his colleague, which shows actually the first signs of his evolution, that he's not just selfishly thinking about himself. There's something very thematic of the movie itself, where even in my own real life, my mother will always, like, behave more like Sank. He's so well mannered. He's not. You get angry about silly things with me. Sank doesn't do that with his mom, and I don't know. Do you not? Do you not call up to your mom if she's bugging you?
I think she would agree with you when she hears how me and my mom have fights.
It's just, but this is the thing, right? Like, and and
Yeah.
no parent is happy. And I think that moment between his friend, when when they're bunked together in that war, and they're on two beds and they're talking to each other, and both of them are clearly scared about what's to come. And you see, I think Pinocchio also realizing that becoming a real boy is not going to fix things,
Mhm.
because that boy is a real boy and he also has problems. His father's not happy, with how he is. And I think that realization that changing yourself is not going to fix it. Transforming yourself, adding to your skills, sure. But changing yourself for something else, exchanging yourself for something else is not going to fix things. And there's this scene where he's like, I'm going to send money to, my father and make sure that he's taken care of and whatever. And of course, the carnival master is not going to send any money to his father. And the father very desperately searching for Pinocchio in this time. There is, at least as a daughter, I have seen, my parents always struggle with that concept of me doing something for them. So if I get them splurge on something for them, if I want to do something for them, they're immediately saying, no, 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 we don't want that. We just want you to be happy. We just want you to be safe, fed, healthy. And that's also like shown, that little element where he's trying to do something for his father, but his father doesn't care. He's just searching for Pinocchio. And I think that journey of Geppetto, where he's like going from, you know, place to place, dealing with like, these larger than life circumstances, almost, uh, kind of, I guess, dying himself almost. It's all there. And Pinocchio has these beautiful, I think, aha moments through the movie, where when he realizes that he is in the realm where he's died on one occasion and he cannot really understand what's going on. He is introduced to the stable of black rabbits who are playing cards. And this is where I think Guillermo del Toro shines in the afterlife, elements of things, or larger than life elements of things, something of fantasy or myth. These rabbits are very macabre kind of concept. Of course, you can see their ribs, but they have black ears and black fur, and um, they carry Pinocchio to the afterlife, I guess, and that's where he meets death, Wood Spirit's sister. So I think Wood Spirit is life, and then death is goddess of death, and her the way she talks to Pinocchio, the one thing that binds the both of them is they're very soothing, very comforting creatures, and their whole identity kind of is wrapped around that. Oh, we are here to do our job, and that job is to maintain life and death, and death sees life as a pushover. It's like, my sister may not understand the rules, but I do, and she's a stickler for the rules. And I think that's the balancing that Pinocchio requires, because this is where we are meeting his parents for the first time, the Wood Spirit and Death. And Death is the one who lays down the law. And Wood Spirit is the softer parent. So it's okay. Let him do what he wants to do. And I think that balance where he is doing whatever he wants, and then Death immediately says, like, every time you do something stupid and you die, you are going to spend more time in this life with me, in the afterlife with me. And I think that nudge in that direction pushes Pinocchio to make a very dark decision that no child should have to face. And he does face that, and he in many ways shows that becoming a real boy, or becoming something that's not a wooden puppet, is not just about flesh and bones, but it's about caring for the people around you, seeing eye to eye with your parents, not necessarily agreeing with them, but maybe understanding that they did what they could do best. And I have those moments throughout my adult years where I was very, like, I was always arguing with my father about something or the other, and then as an adult, I still think I would have done things differently, but I also know that he did what he could do best. And I think that's the final epiphany that Pinocchio has in the movie, where he may never want to go to school like Geppetto wants him to go. He may never want to follow the rules like Geppetto wants him to, but he is he gets why Geppetto wants that to happen. And I think that's the point. Like, seeing eye to eye with your family or your parents or the ones who take care of you is not about agreeing with them, but understanding their perspective. And being agreeable, being obedient is great when you're a child, but when you're growing up, it's not about that. It's about seeing the world through someone's eyes, someone who has seen far worse than you will. And that's the point of the story, that every generation has had it worse than the generation that comes after them. And that generation inclined to see it happen in a story about a wooden boy is it's beyond my realm of understanding, that somebody thought to put this concept together with just a very with, like, basing it off of a fairy tale, but not really intending for it to be a happily ever after. Not that this movie is a tragedy in any way, because it isn't. um but without putting like a perfect bow, oh, everything's fine, everything's put together, no consequences to anyone's actions. uh there are consequences to Pinocchio's actions. Every action of his, he faces the brunt of it. And that's growing up. That is when you're not a child anymore and you have to deal with real life and all its nonsense and all its bullshit. Um, what was for you, Sank? Did you ever see the setup of the movie being more about coming of age or more about existential stuff?
I think it was a bit of both,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So the thing with Death Spirit, that for me was about him coming of age. Every time he died, he learned something new. Oh, by the way, both were voiced by Tilda Swinton brilliantly. Did you know that?
Yes, queen of my
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah. So I think it was a bit of both. The fact that the things that we understand while he's learning stuff, that was about existentialism. But I think, yeah, obviously Pinocchio's the story is about coming of age. Uh, but this is the first time I realized it that I think the journey that Pinocchio takes and the journey which Geppetto takes subsequently, it reminded me so much. It reminded me so much of Finding Nemo. Uh, it's the way they parted, right? The way they parted wasn't obviously pretty,
Mhm.
and all the things that led up when the kidnapping happened and everything. I thought that was also very similar, where Marvin, right? Marvin was facing his own demons about his insecurity about the child and his wife dying. The same thing happens here, but instead of his wife, it's his son. And Pinocchio also, he has his own reasons of doing things which you would call disobedient, and the same thing Nemo does as well. And so through that, they also learn a lot of things. So I drew a lot of parallels, and this is the first time that I thought that Nemo is in a way a Pinocchio story.
100% about the want to see more, do more, be disagreeable with the father about the way he's being raised. 100%. It's about that. It's not necessarily about something mythical, but it's definitely about, one having a motherless childhood. Your both characters don't have a mom to soften the blows. And it's definitely about the relationship between a father and a son, and them constantly evolving through the journey of finding each other. Because finding Nemo is not just finding Nemo, right? It's also finding Marvin.
By the way, both stories have stalks. Here in this one, it did not have, but
Yeah,
the original Pinocchio has a stalk which
yeah,
takes him to school, and
yeah.
here the infamous mine, those stalks.
Those little pelicans. And I think
Oh yeah,
there is a stork who collects Marvin in his beak, right? And then shows
yeah.
Marvin where Nemo is. But I think there is so much to be said about, again, about parenting and fatherhood and the realization of events through other situations which give you epiphanies. And, like, for example, Pinocchio's father's epiphany being that it doesn't matter what he does as long as he's happy. It doesn't matter whether he's like Carlo or not, as long as he's safe. And when you start tallying that up as a father, right? And ultimately, I think that is also Nemo's father's realization that when he has that conversation with Crush, I've spoken about this at some point in the channel. It's like, when they know, you know. When they're ready, you're ready. It's as simple as that. And that is the story. Like, when you're ready, as when your child is ready to take on the world, whether or not you are ready as a parent, you can only protect them. You can't you cannot actually dictate every step of their life. And I think that falls very well into Geppetto's paranoia, that he was just doing his job in a church like he usually does, and still something terrible happened. And I think that lesson, that something terrible can happen anywhere, and all you can do is your best, like
No,
the
no,
great hmm?
yeah. No. I agree. I just when you spoke about the church, there's that amazing scene where they aren't accepting him in the church, but then uh, he looks behind him and he sees the wooden Jesus and he's like, why is he allowed here? And then he even asks Geppetto about it.
Yeah, and Geppetto doesn't have an answer.
Yeah, he doesn't understand whatever the answer that he gives.
Anyone who would like to maybe go deeper into parenthood, or the relationship between a child and a parent or whatever, I really recommend pulling up the lyrics and the translation. If you don't know Hindi, pull up the translation of Tujhse Naraz Nahi Zindagi. And the opening lines of that song, it's about a father, talking to his son, and the lyrics are like, say, I'm not mad at you, I'm just shocked by the questions you have for me. And I'm not necessarily shocked at the nature of the questions, I'm just surprised that I have no answers for them. And it's just that is Pinocchio and Geppetto's relationship, that he doesn't have an answer. When Pinocchio asks him, like, like, did you make me to replace Carlo? He doesn't have an answer, because in reality, he doesn't know. He made him in a drunken stupor. He was mad at the world. He was mad at God. He was mad at everything that took his son away from him. And the questions he poses Pinocchio are not coming from a place of deep thought. They're coming from a child. And as adults, we have been fine-tuned and engineered and like beaten into being a particular way and accepting it for what it is. And that's why that question is very important. It's like, why is the statue of Jesus allowed in here, but I am being ousted for being exactly what that statue is? Am I also not a creation of God in some way? And I think that the fact that they could remove religion and God and anything of the nature which like talks about divinity in any way, they completely remove that, and they just talk about the humanity of people. Like, what makes me so different, or so how can I be so excluded? Like, how can I be so terrible that I need to be excluded or made into a real boy? Do I need to be made into a real boy at all? And that's I think the sentiment of it, that is the pursuit to be something of flesh and bones, or is the pursuit to fall in line with what the adults are expecting you to be? And ultimately, I mean, at least for most of us, it is to fall in line. Our existence is to not stand out, to not be different, to not be weird, to not be something that adults cannot understand and fathom. And uh, Pinocchio poses that very wonderful question, like, would it matter? Would I be harming someone's existence by being who I am? And I think that is the beauty of it all. And you also see like the society changing around Geppetto. When Carlo's alive, Geppetto is happy, and he has no complaints in life, and everybody says, oh, he's such a good citizen, he's such a good man. And then when the world sees that Pinocchio was created by Geppetto and he's like this moving puppet character, the first thing the priest accuses Geppetto of is like, you don't have time to complete the Jesus in our church, but you have time to make this puppet. Like, rather than sympathizing with the depression and the agony this man is going through, he kind of like insults him and intimidates him into finishing the Jesus, which is a place of trauma for this man. So he kind of like corners him into like revisiting that trauma by completing that, which he does. But you get to see small details, like almost blink and you'll miss details about how the characters are treated by society in general, and what ultimately makes them want to just say enough is enough, and I'm going to do what is right for me and my family. And that's the story, that I have to do what is right for me, regardless of what the expectation is. And both Geppetto and Pinocchio realize that. They meet each other in the middle. It's not a compromise. When you reach the end of the story, you'll realize it's not a compromise that they have made. It is just the way it is. I'll meet you in the middle and we'll figure out the rest from there. And that's the story. Like I said earlier in the video, we love the both, you know, the making of these videos, the applause, the appreciation that we get from you guys. We care deeply about stories. We are trying very hard to explore as much as possible. It's just the two of us, so there's just two sources, and we tend to be aligned with what we consider good in cinema. So there's a chance that you could give us a recommendation which is different from what we are suggesting, and we could watch that movie just on your recommendation and have a good old discussion. So comment and share and like and subscribe and push these videos, guys, as much as you can, because we want to create a community for storytelling. If you are on any social media platform, you will see that there is AI is entering the creative sphere and trying to, I guess, imitate what human storytelling has been trying to do for decades now. And I don't necessarily want to talk about my stand on it, but I definitely would like to say that there is so much beauty and so much sentiment in human storytelling and in the flavor that a human brings to stories, and we want to celebrate that. And for that, we need your help. We need you to tell us what you're liking about the videos, or what you would like us to change about the videos, what we need to improve, what we need to roll back on. And that comes from your support. So please like and share and subscribe. We love you, and we will see you soon.
Right.
Bye, guys.